This meeting is being recorded.
I love that they now tell you that. We've been on Zoom so long, they didn't used to do that.
Go ahead, you're in at 6:30. You're welcome to start the meeting.
Sweet. It is 6:30. This is a meeting of the Chagrin Falls Village Council Streets and Sidewalks Committee. Committee member Andrew Rocky is here. Also joining us from council is Ms. DiBernardo, Mr. Corcoran, and Mr. Drum. From the administration, Mr. Jameson, Mr. Brockway, and I believe the police chief is also here. I don't see her name, but I think she's here. Is she here, Christy?
Not yet, but okay. I can reach out to her as well.
Okay, no worries. I didn't mean to call her out like that. Okay. So we've had an interesting snow year, which has brought to light some struggles the village has with the current sidewalk clearing process and the ordinance. So the current ordinance on our books does require sidewalks to be cleared within 2 hours of the end of a snowfall. This ordinance was passed in 1987, and it's listed as a misdemeanor 1. So for those who are like, oh, misdemeanor 1, I don't know how to contextualize that. This is the same as domestic violence. So it's a pretty hefty misdemeanor for those who choose not to shovel their sidewalks. Apparently there was something that happened in the late 80s, and the council at the time went through and made a whole bunch of things misdemeanors in the first that maybe today in most communities would not maybe meet the threshold of what we consider to be first degree misdemeanors. Would that be a fair way of saying that, Chief? Yeah, okay. So I think all of us here recognize that it's time for updates to this ordinance, and whatever we do and however we go forward, I think the biggest piece we need to start with is listening to residents and listening to the community and listening to our neighbors, because I think there's a lot of different perspectives and experience. And I think, some of those factors are when we personally walk, whether or not, you're overseeing children who walk to school, if you're in a business area, if you're in a residential area, if you're in an area with sidewalks that have a tree lawn and an area of sidewalks that don't have tree lawns, because there's shoveling challenges so that there's just a variety of, it's a huge spectrum of sidewalks. And adding into that, we have a variety of types of sidewalks. So some of our sidewalks are a mere 2 feet, and other sidewalks are 100-year-old sandstone slabs. And so, we see heaving because, of course, we're a treed community. And so we do see, tree roots will push those sidewalk things, the sidewalk pieces up. We do have abilities in-house. Say that again?
Slab, maybe?
There we go. I'll go with that. To push a sidewalk slab up, we do have the ability to sort of basically lift these up, deal with the tree roots below and replace them. But it is an intensive experience, or exhaustive, intensive process. So it does take time, which is something the Village Street Department has limited amount of sometimes. So my goal tonight is to bring the people the residents who have attended in, hear what everybody has to say. We do have a hard stop tonight at 7:20 because we have to technically switch over to the village council meeting, and we need a little bit of behind the scenes time in order to get the next meeting running and shut this one down, because that's the story. So I'm going to ask people to take a turn to speak, and once everyone in the audience has had an opportunity to speak, and then if you want to take a second turn, that's, we're totally open to that. We want to hear people. Council's mostly here to listen tonight. I want us to sort of gather all the feedback. And this is going to be one of those things where I don't think we're not going to be able to walk away tonight with a perfect solution that is going to meet the needs of everybody. My thought, though, is we need to start by listening and making sure we hear all the perspectives so that as we sort of vet and figure out how we move forward in future winters, that we've heard as many voices as we can, because that's why we're here. So did I miss anything? Okay. So Amber, can you I just want to address the fact that right now this is a misdemeanor in the first degree. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for those of us who are not lawyers or police officers and maybe who don't deal with, wrongdoing quite so?
Sure. So essentially, misdemeanors and felonies both are categorized by degree. And a misdemeanor of the first degree is essentially the most serious level of misdemeanor, which basically means that someone can be in prison, or well, not in prison, but put in jail for up to 6 months and fined up to $1,000. So equivalent offenses that are misdemeanors of the first degree include assault, domestic violence, stalking, theft offenses of a certain dollar amount. So, and sometimes, I mean, there are reasons to make certain things an M1, but it also essentially brings in more court requirements as well. So for example, if you have a misdemeanor of the first degree, you are entitled to a jury trial if you so choose that, or if you demand that.
So does that mean in a sidewalk case, we would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was like John Smith who did not shovel his sidewalk?
Correct. And that's one of the concerns that I have with the ordinance as it's written is, so what if there are two people that own the house? What if there's two names on the mortgage or the lease or whatever? Who gets the citation? What if the homeowner is not even in the state when it happens? Or what if a corporation owns it? So it complicates the matter. And then when you bring in that level, that degree of offense, it doesn't make sense to cite somebody with an M1 for not shoveling their sidewalk.
Okay. And grass mowing is not enforced through the police department. That's enforced through our building and zoning department when people let it grow up knee high, right?
That's correct. That's property maintenance violation.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for the police chief before we start hearing from residents? So go ahead, Andrew. And residents, if you want to speak, you can use the raise your hand function and we'll start taking people in the order we see hands go up.
I know we've talked about this in the past, Amber, but let's talk a little bit about the police department's ability to execute or discretion in enforcing this, and how does that apply? How does that apply to kind of the way this ordinance is written? Do you have the ability to execute discretion with this?
I mean, we have discretion in everything that we do essentially, but from the standpoint of looking at citing residents, for example, during that last snowstorm, 50% of the residents in this village did not shovel their sidewalks. So how do I then decide who gets a cite for it and who doesn't? There's no fair way to do that based on our current ordinance. And the same is true with the business. So our current ordinance treats businesses and residences the same. So am I going to only cite businesses and not cite the residents? I mean, there's always discretion, but how do I do that in a fair way without being accused of not being fair?
That sounds fair. It's a good question.
That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay. I see Becky Thomas's hand up. Can we move her over? And John Finley, your hand went up and then it went down. So if you still, okay. So we'll move Becky over and then we'll do John Finley. We'll bring John Finley in.
Zoom is taking a moment.
Sometimes Zoom takes a moment. Okay, Becky, you're in. If you want to unmute and start your camera, that'd be lovely. And for the public record, if you can give us your name and address, that would be lovely.
Okay. Rebecca Thomas, 124 Ridgewood. The thing you were discussing, the misdemeanors, crazy. I mean, that's just crazy. But so that definitely needs to be changed. But the thing that puzzles me is that when we got sidewalks on Ridgewood, we all had to vote on our street to get them. And we knew that we were responsible for keeping them clear in some way because kids walk to school on them. But for some of us, it's not possible sometimes. I mean, there are families that go to Florida for 3 months out of the year and they don't shovel their sidewalks. And so consequently, my husband and I have been shoveling, but then some other families don't. And it just seems, I don't know, it's kind of it's a dilemma. Let's put it that way. So my idea was to have a list of eligible teenagers, especially when their schools closed because of weather or on weekends when they would be available, that would be willing to shovel sidewalks, and we could pay them, to do it. And there would be a list of elderly people or people that were not able to shovel could call into the village, and kids would have their names listed and we could call them or they could call us or whatever. And it would be a great way for them to meet their community service needs at the high school, and also very helpful to people who cannot shovel any longer. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
I appreciate you coming out tonight
Yep.
and for shoveling your sidewalk.
Yep.
John,
Okay, can you hear me now?
we can.
Thank you. Well, anyway, I'm a crossing guard.
Can you give me your name and address too, just for the
Well, my
public
name
record?
is John Finley. My address is 510 North Main Street, Chagrin Falls.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So I'm a crossing guard at the corner of Bell and Philomethian. And the only major issue we had this year was the first day that school started again after the, Christmas break, the holiday break. Nothing was shoveled and the kids had to walk in the street. So that was, I walked behind them. So if any car hit anybody, it would be me rather than the kids. But probably that might have been more an issue for the schools rather than the village. Perhaps they shouldn't have school that day because the kids, it was a very dangerous day for the kids.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, John, that you want us to be aware of?
No, that's pretty much it, Erin. Otherwise, people generally do a pretty good job shoveling and obviously the street department does a great job. So that's all I have, Erin.
Awesome. Thanks for coming out tonight, John.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hi, Lisa. You're up next. Do you want to unmute and share your story with us? I know you have a good one.
Hi. So I just want to introduce myself first. My name is Lisa Fetterman. I live directly across from the 712 campus and on East Washington Street. That's 407 East Washington Street. And I'm also a teacher at the high school. So I walk to work every day and usually walking back and forth more than once every day to the 712 campus. So this year, when we had a couple of big snowstorms, I contacted both the high school administration, the school board, and the village also got pulled into our email thread with Erin about what I felt was a very unsafe situation with the crosswalk in front of the high school on East Washington Street. So with the storms that we had, the entrance to the crosswalk is completely blocked by probably 5 feet of snow, to the degree that you cannot access the button to push the crosswalk, much less walk through that area on the crosswalk. So essentially kids are standing in the middle of the intersection trying to cross East Washington without the benefit of a light or a crosswalk.
Is it on the high school side or on the residential side?
The blocked crosswalk?
Yeah.
Primarily on the residential side.
Okay.
Because the high school does use a little mini snow plow to clear their sidewalks. I have been clearing it a lot myself this winter, and I did cross over and clear the high school side one time, but primarily I've been clearing the residential side.
Okay.
I would just like to say that the reason I started the thread is because I feel it's very much a safety issue, not a convenience issue. Also, the entrance to the sidewalk is directly next to the road. And with the amount of snow we had, all of that entrance of the crosswalk is filled with snow coming off the snow plows that keep going down East Washington. So the snow is super, super heavy, very difficult to remove when we have a big storms like we did a couple of times this year. I know one time the high school staff, after I raised the issue, did come over and clear the residential side. That happened one time. And, they brought their mini snowplow equipment because that's what was needed to clear that amount of snow that was compacted from the snow coming off the road. I think it would have been extremely difficult to do that by hand, regardless of how able-bodied you were in those large snowstorms. Obviously, with a small amount of snow, it's a different story. But anyway, what kind of was said in the email threads was, this is the residents' responsibility. It's not the village responsibility. It's not the school responsibility. But I was extremely frustrated because meanwhile, for a whole week, kids are standing in the middle of the intersection trying to cross with no light. And to me, that seems irresponsible not to try to find a solution to that. So.
Great. Well, I think we hopefully can find some solutions here. It's just gonna take a little bit of sifting to get there.
I'm going to mute. Thank you for your.
Okay, thanks. Can you bring in Jeff Wenninger?
Doing it now.
Hello?
Hey, Jeff, go ahead. Can you do your name and address to start with, please?
Sure. My name is Jeff Woodinger, and I live at 59 Hall Street in the village. Primarily my experience with the snow removal is serving as a volunteer crossing guard. And I guess I have a few thoughts. After 30 years of public service in Los Angeles, I think first and foremost, snow removal is a very conspicuous thing that's right in front of our face that speaks volumes of the community, the community's government, as well as the community members at large relative to their pride and what they prioritize. When it comes to the current ordinances and what the city's responsibility is for clearing sidewalks and whatnot, and what the residents and businesses responsibilities are, and this ordinance, which may or may not be realistic or fairly enforceable. I think we need to kind of come up with some ideas of really define who we want to be. Because it is pretty, I am shocked at how few people actually clear their walkways, as well as businesses. I walk my dog a couple miles every day, and some of these days it's quite treacherous walking through the community. And as John spoke of earlier, seeing these kids walking in the streets, it's a public safety situation. It really is. And from a historical perspective, the ordinance, why it is a misdemeanor 1, I'd like to know more historically why that's the case. There may be a rational reason for that. I suspect it might be because if you write them a citation, it's a presumptive guilt, and it's like running through a stop sign. Presumptive guilt, where if it's a misdemeanor 1, you have an opportunity to mitigate it with some explanations. But as property owners, if we're going to be out of town for 3 months, it's still our responsibility to ensure that our sidewalks are clear, our grass is mowed and so on and so forth. It just really speaks to what kind of community we want to live in and what responsibility we want to take for that. And I'm not sure. I think there needs to be accommodations made for a lot of people. A lot of people aren't physically able to clear their sidewalks. Some people can't financially afford for people to do that for them. But there should be something that we can create governmentally or volunteer wise wherein this can be addressed. You know, I think we're one of the top 10 small city shopping locations. It wouldn't be in the wintertime when we've had a good snow because it's so treacherous down there. And I think it's just very important that we address this, not only for the safety of the children, but people that come here to shop, you know, live and visit. It's really important. And it really is only going to be a few days a year. We don't have that many horrible snow days, but I think we need to have something in place that things can get done. I'm glad we're talking about this.
Any other thoughts? Okay, anything else, Jeff?
No, that's all.
Okay, well, thank you for coming out tonight. I agree. Michelle, can we bring Michelle in? And if Zoom's being annoying, you can bring in Catherine and we'll take her comments after we take Michelle's.
Thank you.
Sometimes Zoom decides to be very thoughtful about what it does. Michelle, you're in if you want to unmute and
now. Hi guys, so it's Kathleen Garvey.
Hey Catherine, hold on. We're gonna do Michelle first and then we're gonna get to you. I'm sorry.
Hi,
Michelle,
can you hear me?
yeah, go ahead. Name and address to start with, please.
Michelle Haggerty, 32 Walnut Street.
Go ahead.
Hi, yes, so relatively new addition to the community, loving living here, love everything about it. When I moved in, initially I was renovating, didn't know the sidewalk. I was renovating last winter, didn't know the sidewalk issues, didn't shovel, didn't have anything. And then this winter, I was actually out of town for a month. In January, my mother had issues, and the service I hired, who was supposed to do the sidewalk, didn't do the sidewalk. Anyway, I came home to a mess and felt really guilty about it. But then as I walked through the community, I would say only 1 in 8 residences were shoveling. And, you know, a lot of my contiguous neighbors were not shoveling, and longtime residents. So, you know, I'm a little bit struggling with this because when I first heard about it, you know, I don't think we want to shame and name residents. That to me would be bad because, you know, again, I was unaware initially, and then I was, you know, for a month thinking it was being done and it wasn't being done. And if I were going to be cited or shamed and named, you know, all that, I'm just a little worried about where this is going. You know, I think that it's wonderful that it's a walking community. And when I am home, I make sure, and now that even, you know, I have a new plow service, making sure that it gets done. But there's not a way that every resident can optimally get out there within 2 hours to do this, let alone maybe sometimes days to do this. And their snowplow service may not even come if there's less than 3 inches or whatever. So I'm just weighing in because I'm trying to understand where this is going. And I totally get the kids walking to school issue. And my thinking on those issues is that the areas contiguous to schools, maybe the city should be handling that. But again, I don't know what the answer is. I totally love walking in the community. I walk my dogs. I love everything about it. I'm trying to be a good citizen and neighbor. But I don't know what the answer is to this, other than not, I don't know that you can legislate it. Anyway, that's my thoughts. So.
We appreciate you coming out. Just as a point of reference, the village has not really taken a deep dive into our sidewalk ordinance. My understanding is the last time was the early 90s, maybe the mid 90s. And obviously, some of us weren't around then. I don't think anyone currently on council was here then. So it just felt like it was time, because we had a lot of residents expressing concerns about the passability of our sidewalks. So we wanted to bring it up and have that conversation. I see Andrew laughing because he and I were both like in middle school and high school in the early 90s, elementary school,
Wasn't born when that ordinance, the misdemeanor ordinance, was written.
Were you really not born then?
89.
I was 6. I was like in first grade. Okay, Catherine, go ahead.
First of all, so I'm Kathleen Garvey. I live at 70 East Washington Street. So I'm kind of here in two capacities. I'm on the school board, as many of you know, but also I'm the board president of Safe Routes to School for Chagrin Falls and a crossing guard. So first of all, I guess I want to say kudos to council and everybody here for caring about this issue. I remember reading in the paper recently, I think Rob, you were quoted saying that walkability is really one of our greatest features of our village. And I echo what Jeffrey Woodinger said, that, this reflects on who we are as a community. And you can't just be walkable some of the time and people not be able to rely on, when they can walk to Heinen's or walk to the shops, or certainly for those kids that walk every day to school, they kind of don't know what they're going to encounter on a regular basis. And that's very unsettling, I think, for some parents. Especially if they were to hear that kids are sometimes walking in the street or they're unable to access the crossing signal, which happened at most of the corners adjacent to the intermediate school during these last couple of storms. Some of them were in residential areas, but some of them were not. They were in the business district. And it's true, the plows tend to, even if somebody did get up and shovel at 4 a.m, the plow might completely cover that crosswalk entrance again. So just something to be aware of as the village is providing services to move cars along. What services are we providing to move walkers along? I guess the other thing I would want to say is that don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There is no perfect solution to this. There are always going to be contingencies where people are out of town, or they didn't know, or they're too old and they can't manage it, or they can't afford to hire somebody to do it. And there's all of those things, but I still think that you can focus on some improvements that could make a significant difference. It'll never be 100%, but I think that addressing the ordinance, doing some outreach that's really positive and reinforcing to community members about why we value walking, and it takes all of us, it takes a village in order to maintain that. Those kinds of things can be very helpful. I think that when it comes to the businesses, I would encourage you to consider a different ordinance. To me, I feel like businesses that are functioning in our community have a different level of responsibility to keep pathways clear. That includes many that we know are like multiple repeaters, the post office being one, and Howard Hanna being one, and many others that unfortunately you get closer to the business district and you're now impeding the vast majority of our population from being able to get downtown safely. And and appreciate everything that our village has to offer. With regard to the school crosswalks and, it's a complicated issue there. I appreciate Becky's idea, and I wanted to comment a little bit. I think some of you here have some historical knowledge that we did try a program of having students earn community service hours to shovel, and it was a disaster. One of the biggest issues is coordinating it. It took a lot of time to coordinate, and that fell on the village. But the biggest issue is that high school students are in school by 7:30 in the morning. And so they're not likely to shovel before they go to school. And so then you're looking at volunteers coming, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon if they don't have sports or some other activity. And by then you're not really addressing the need for the sidewalk to be clear for the majority of the day. And the other, a lot of our kids do earn community service hours. They're required if they want to do senior project. But they have so many ways to earn those hours that we don't typically have a lot of kids clamoring for those extra hours. So I don't think you would have a consistent group of volunteers if it were to rely just on students. So let's see, the other thing, we do have a safety committee within the school district, and we are going to have a meeting in a couple of weeks, also including this issue to see, we'd like to work together with the village. I think that Lisa's comments about that the weight of the snow almost requiring one of our machines is very relevant. And so, I can't speak for the district. I know there's some issues with us doing things off of our own property. But let's see if we can try to find a way, to work together to at least resolve those major intersections where students are walking to school. The last thing I'll say, and I'm happy to answer any questions if any of you have them. I know Angie and I have been probably thinking and working about this issue for at least 10 years or more. I did have one idea, which was a shovel brigade, and maybe to have a group of volunteers that would be on call and would be willing to have a dial out that says we're expecting a huge snow. Shovel brigade is going to meet at the bandstand at 5:30 a.m. on the next morning, and we'll send you out to the most precarious parts of the community to see if we can clear. Just an idea. We might be able to get volunteers who would be willing to do that, or bring their huge snow blowers and take an area of town to help out.
I love it. I also love the name Snow Brigade, sending them into the danger zones.
I would say that we have to be careful. We can't just rely on volunteers. I think that we have to take responsibility that it has to be consistent, and some of the more traveled areas we need to address with governmental interaction.
I agree. I will be at the safety meeting for what it's worth.
Hey.
Do we have anyone else in the audience? Does anyone have questions for Catherine? I know she talked about a couple historic programs. No? Okay. Does anyone else in the audience have questions or comments they would like to share with us? No one's raising their hands. Okay. If anybody else has secondary comments, you're welcome to.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, you can go for it, Andrew.
It's, I understand that this is a problem, and I'm going to dig down into why we have a opposite problem on Bradley Street where I live. Our sidewalks are always clear. It happens. I mean, Ed Ferry, who lives down the street from us, does it. I do them. My neighbor next door does them. We've got two people on the other side of the street that do them. I mean, in the last snowstorm, we look like the airport with two snowblowers going down the sidewalk. I mean, it takes us 45 minutes to do our entire street, both sides. So I'll have a conversation with that group to find out why we get out and do it. We just, if you're doing your driveway and the sidewalks hasn't been done, if you have a snowblower, it's kind of this, it's this just unspoken rule that you just get out and do the sidewalk. So we just
positive social pressure.
We have some social pressure that goes along with it, or we don't mind doing it. So it's kind of an interesting one, but I'll talk to that group. I know Ed is the one that started it a long, long time ago, and I'll talk to him about why he feels the need to do it. But and I'll get some background on that because we're pretty good. I mean, and there's a guy who does it on Bellevue by us. He gets all of Bellevue up and down. So I'll get with our little group of people and find out more about what drives us to do it and see if that can add to it.
Anyone else on council? Otherwise, I'm going to let Lisa speak again.
Yeah, I have a
Brian,
quick
go.
question. Maybe Angie knows the answer. I know there was some discussion at one point about the new Merchants Association getting together and arranging for something. Has there been any progress, or do you have any update on that?
I don't know whether we want Lisa to speak. I have a couple of comments I was going to update on that at that time. So do you want Lisa to say her bit and then I'll update on that when at the end? Okay.
You're the best. Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
I just had something quick. I was just going to ask Catherine if I'm wrong, I might be wrong about this, but what is the area around the schools where the school does not provide bus transportation? Is it like, that's a thing, right?
It's actually not. We provide universal busing.
Okay, so
anybody in the district that wants to have a bus can have one. There are many families that live close to the schools that will notify the bus garage that they're never going to take the bus.
Right.
Right. But if they ever wanted to, they would have the option. So we're fortunate that way. There are some school districts that, only bus within, if you live outside of a mile or so.
Right. And I think maybe it used to be that way because I remember something like that, but that's not relevant right now. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, Angie, the spotlight is yours. Wait, you muted yourself.
Yeah, I'm muted. All right, so I have a few comments. The first is on the current legislation. I do want to say that I personally think the 2-hour limit is crazy. It's not in line with what other communities are doing. So we do obviously have to address even just our current legislation. And I also want to learn more about this first-degree misdemeanor because that seems a little overreaching. The second is crosswalks. As a member of council, I'd like to say that I strongly believe that we need to be clearing places where we've painted crosswalks. This is a complaint we also had from the merchants. I hadn't heard this complaint from Lisa, that Lisa Fetterman brought to us tonight at the schools, which is obviously another area, but the merchants said that Triangle Park was cleared and the side of Triangle Park entrance into the park was cleared, but the entrance of the mid-block crosswalks to the street was not cleared. And I did actually document that by walking by the area. But I think if we go to the trouble of putting in a public crosswalk and painting it or putting in brick, we should have it on our list as a place that we clear so that people can access a button and walk across the street at that point. So I feel like that's something that we can do at this point. Third, the merchant plan. Yes, the Merchant Association was just formed last summer. And the point of that is to give the merchants the ability to act collectively. And this winter, one of the things that they realized is a problem for them, all the merchants, is most of these places are owned by a single owner. They're generally mom and pop operations. It is hard for them to get out. They're the ones who are getting out there and shoveling in front of their walk. And the recent storm, Samantha Probst, who's the president of the Merchant Association at Little Babette, the stores on both sides of her, people were on vacation during that storm. So she was out trying to shovel their walks and communicating with them, because it doesn't make any difference if you shovel the walk in front of your store. If nobody can get to that cleared walkway, you really need the entire walkway cleared. So the merchants are working to try to use some of their Merchant Association fees to put out a bid for the entire downtown merchant area to some of the larger companies. And the idea is, in my work with Safe Routes to try to get sidewalks cleared, one of the things that we learned is it's really hard to get someone to come out to do a tiny job, because tiny jobs just don't mean anything to these landscaping companies or these plow companies. They're not going to get out of their truck and shovel a sidewalk. But if you give them a whole neighborhood, they might do it. So we think the size of the downtown area might be a big enough job that a landscaping company might take it. And she has had interest from a couple of the landscaping companies. Where she's running into difficulty is she's never organized this kind of thing. So I'm going to try to help her. And I'm hoping that Rob Jameson can also give me some help on this, because they're happy to pay for it. They're happy to organize it. They just don't know exactly how to do it. So, so we're gonna, maybe I'll sit down with Rob. I know he's been immersed in budgeting, but when I could get a few minutes with him, it might be a way we can approach it the next year. And yeah. Oh, great, Andrew, that would be great. They just, you know, they have the will, they have the funds, they just don't have the know-how, and I know we do. So if we can help them in that way, that would be good. Okay, and then, okay, the last thing that I wanted to comment on was the volunteer services that Catherine had proposed. And I think that's great. And obviously I'll be out there with my shovel. If, you know, if we put together a group, or get a snowblower down there. But I do think that if you're gonna have any kind of volunteer effort, we need to have a clarity on what we're gonna focus on, because there's two different approaches you can take. You can say, like, a lot of places like Solon, some of the bigger towns have these applications where a senior or somebody who is unable to clear their sidewalk can apply for winter assistance for the year. And that is handled in-house by the government, but it's handled by volunteers. So basically they get a registry of houses that are eligible for clearance. If you're like over 65, you can qualify, or if you have some type of disability, you can qualify. But the fact is the volunteers aren't going to be able to clear everything. So they either need to have targeted houses, or we need to say we're clearing the school routes because these are priority routes, or one or the other. But I feel like, again, even if we're going to use volunteers, it would work better if there was a focus, because there's no way even, I mean, if the village is looking at it and saying, hey, we can't clear everything with employees, we're not going to be able to do it with volunteers. Right. It's a big job. So I think that if that's the route we want to go, that we should all put our heads together and come up with a plan. And that's it. I'm done.
No, I appreciate that. I will add two things to this. First of all, it is 7:12. We will have a hard stop at 7:20. If someone in the audience suddenly would like to speak, you are welcome to raise your hand. We will bring you in. I know, Mike, hold on. Council's just speaking now because our audience was done speaking. And then the other thing I would throw out there is that, since Barbara Christian's listening to us right now, if someone out in the community has some energy around this volunteer stuff and would like to be part of these conversations, I encourage them to reach out. I can speak. I'd be happy to include people who are actively interested in helping build this for our community in this whole process, because I think those volunteers may help drive some of where we land with this too. Because like I said in the beginning, we're really in a space of listening right now, just to make sure we understand perspectives. And so if there's a core of volunteers like those in Andrew's neighborhood who want to help lead it and help teach other neighborhoods how we can get that culture, please reach out, because it matters. Okay, Mike, you've been waiting very patiently. Go ahead.
Yeah, just first of all, I have an observation to make, but a question for Angie. Angie, on the Merchant Association, what's your thought about the difference between the merchants and the building owners? Because we're talking about, there's also people who aren't merchants, second floor renters, and it just seems to me with residences, we essentially the ordinance essentially hangs it on the building owner, and here we're talking about the possibility of tenants.
Sure, and I absolutely can see that. I think that the merchants are seeing it as a practical aspect to run their business. But I agree, I can see that being an internal argument that they may have with their landlord. It may be that their landlord will kick in for the merchant fees. I don't know, but I agree. I mean, I imagine if we're going to, I know when Catherine mentioned, you know, let's handle businesses differently than than residential customers, I winced a little bit, because I love sidewalks and I love walking, but I also love my merchants, and I know that they're small. But you're right when you mentioned that it would be the building owner, I believe, that would be the person that would be we'd be contacting. And I know that when we did this with Safe Routes, we did contact businesses then. There was an active program to go out to businesses and say, you need to clear your walk. They had, the administrators went out, sometimes the police went out, but it was only targeted to businesses, because that was really all we could possibly get, all we could get to happen was for those local businesses downtown on the school routes to basically have some pressure put on them. But yeah, it's an interesting thought, Mike. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, a couple of observations. First of all, Catherine, thanks for making your comment about don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes.
There is no perfect solution here. I do believe that there's some things that we can do to make the situation a lot worse. Don't know all the details to it. We'll get into that as we talk through this. But I also think that we also got to remember that there's no way that we're going to be able to create a solution that's going to solve everything that Mother Nature can throw at us. We're coming from this from a time that because we had people that didn't do a good faith effort, we also did it at a time where we had 2 of the top 10 24-hour snow events of the last 10 years in 11-day stretch with no melt between it. In contrast, this past Saturday, we had 4 to 6 inches of snow in my driveway on West Washington, and here we are 48 hours later, and it's gone. So there's a great variability on what happens here, and I think there's some things that we can do to make things a lot better, and I think we need to. But at the same time, I don't know that we're going to be able to create a problem or create a solution that solves what happened in that 11-day period, because at the very time when you've got the worst need, not only is the village capacity completely overtaken, getting getting streets and parking lots, but the private contractors out there. My son-in-law's got a business, and in the second snowstorm, he worked 43 consecutive hours just doing driveways and CVS's. So I think that it's a difficult solution. And I think at some point we have to talk about residents and businesses being different and being a little more aggressive in the enforcement. And I think that there's some things that we can do, and are going to discuss some options that'll make things a lot better. But again, it's never going to be perfect. We got to aim for that good that Catherine was mentioning.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine, and then you'll be the last one, and then we're gonna adjourn.
Thanks. So I just wanted to add that when I was talking about businesses being treated differently, it's more to recognize that those are so highly traveled areas in front of businesses that they need extra attention. So maybe they rise to the top of a priority list if we have a group of volunteers, if what you're doing, Angie, which sounds amazing, doesn't come to fruition. Secondly, I also wanted to mention, we haven't talked about private plow companies. We talked about the village plows, which definitely, I know on Bell Street, even, the village plow can undo a whole bunch of work that residents are doing. So I'm not really sure what the answers are to that. I know, Aaron, you're a plow expert now, so you guys can probably figure it all out. But private companies are equally guilty of sometimes piling up the snow on the sidewalks and creating an obstruction. I know from years ago that the city of Hudson had a licensure process for private companies to be able to serve their customers in the city. And one of the agreements was that you would not do that. And if you were found that you were doing that, you could be removed from the list of eligible companies to service that area. So that's just something, to consider. And then we haven't really talked about it, but maybe a resource list. There are some companies that will clear sidewalks. Maybe we can help provide some information to people about where they can, if they're going away for the winter, or if they can't manage their own sidewalks, where can they go? What are their options? Maybe we could even do some type of a discount that's because they're offered up through the village. Another possibility, because the volunteers are not going to be able to get everywhere if we even are able to get a volunteer program going. So, all right, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
So this is the first in probably what's going to be a couple conversations as we try and get some momentum, as we get some progress moving forward. I've been talking to other communities, to service directors, understanding how their processes work, like on the ground for them. Rob Jameson has been doing the same because he has way more contacts than me. I've just been meeting new people and talking to them. And then obviously I went and took my snowplow ride just to see what it felt like to be inside one of our snowplows, because that was a mystery that no longer is. So I feel like I've learned a lot too from that. So we will keep talking. My goal is to probably schedule a meeting in maybe a month or so, and we will start looking at what some options look like and what some other people are doing and how we think it can maybe work for us. And I appreciate everybody coming out and understanding that this is, it needs to be taken care of, but that we need to make sure we know what we're doing so we don't make it worse, but also, not stop in the pursuit of perfect. So. Thank you. And I will see everybody at council in 10 minutes because I know everyone's excited to join us there too. Okay.
Thanks, Erin.